fun to celebrate my 10 subscribers to my YouTube channel. I'm gonna do a little drawing today that was requested of a hoodie from somebody from drawing someone from behind, or more specifically, just looking at the fabric and shading. So I wanna show you a couple examples of this photo and why it is so important to put your picture into black and white and have a good range of value. So if I were trying to draw this photo, I would have a really hard time. I can tell there's a little bit of highlight here. I can see there's some highlight here on the side, but on the whole, I don't see a lot of value shifts in this photograph. So I took this into my photos, I edited it, and I upped the contrast so that I can really see a lot more of the highlights and shadows happening there. You'll also notice I put a grid onto this picture. Putting a grid onto a picture always will make your life easier when you're drawing it. I just divided everything in half. So like this picture was 5 inches wide from here to here. So I just made a mark at 2.5. Same thing at the bottom, made a mark at 2.5. This is a mark at, and this was 10 inches from the end to the end. So I divided that in half and then divided that in half. So anytime you're gonna draw a photograph, I really recommend using a grid to break the picture down for yourself to make it easier to get those proportions correct. So on my sketchbook paper, I did the same thing. 5 inches here, everything is 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. But again, you don't even have to always measure. Sometimes you can just, estimate and be like, okay, this is about the halfway point. This is about the halfway point. This is about the halfway point. So you don't have to be always super precise in your measurements, but you do want to have some type of grid to help you out. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna block in the shape here at the top. Like that. And again, when we do this, our goal is not worrying about details. Our goal is not to worry about shading at all. We're just trying to get everything in the correct spot. So I can kind of see this line right here of this person's back. It kind of arches up over here. When I do this type of drawing, I'll just look at my photo and you guys can just look at the drawing. When I do this type of drawing, I'm constantly looking back and forth between my drawing and my photograph, right? As you guys know, we don't want to make this up. That is the biggest problem that most people have when they draw, is they start looking too much at what their drawing looks like and not enough at what their photo looks like. Keeping in mind that what we're doing is we're trying to use our photo as a reference, right? So if you're not looking at your photo, then you really don't have a reference, and then you're making it up from your own mind, and that's when things start to look not realistic. I'm just sketching in a couple of the wrinkles on here right now, just so I can make sure that I get those. This kind of comes around there. And again, my goal with this drawing is just to have fun, because drawing is fun. It's fun to kind of see how this is going to turn out. This might be a drawing that I'm pretty proud of at the end of this, or this could be a drawing where I'm like, oh, that was a learning experience and it didn't go super great, and that's okay either way. Remember that when we are learning new techniques and trying new things in life, we don't want to go into things expecting that we're always going to be, good at it, and then it's going to be easy for us. Remember that most things in life, art included, are not easy. Hopefully you find them fun, but just because something is fun does not mean that it is easy to do. I'm just doing a quick contour drawing right now, just kind of blocking out where all these shapes are. Remember that when you draw, you want to be looking at both the positive and the negative shapes. So one of the things that I look at a lot when I'm drawing is not just this, but like, for example, when I look at this box I'm drawing right here, I'm really looking at this background shape. What is that shape right there? And am I getting that accurate? This part right here, is that close or is it accurate over here in my drawing? Or when I look at over here, this negative shape right here over the shoulder, I'm trying to get that negative shape right here to match. Let's see, this is a little bit faded out. It's hard to see kind of the background in this, but that's not really what I'm focusing on right now. But I'll block in just a little bit of this down here. Okay, so where I'm really gonna focus on shading today is kind of up here in the hood and in here in the back of the hoodie. So I'm gonna start up here at the top. Again, this is what my reference is right here. I haven't quite put in all the details on this yet that I wanna notice. I wanna notice right here, there's a little highlight. Right here, there's kind of a little, you can see a little triangle there of dark value. There's a little indent in here. And again, these grid lines are helping me know where are these shadows located. So it always looks a little strange at first because it's all just lines, but once we start getting the shading in there, it's going to start to look more realistic. Okay, so when I start shading again, I like to put down graphite with my 4B pencil. I always sharpen it beforehand because I'm not going to be using the tip of the pencil. I'm going to be using the side of this graphite to lay down that, that pigment, that value. Small circles to start out, and I'm going to start by just putting a light layer, and I'm going to darken up specifically where I see darker shadows, and I'm just going to keep it a little bit lighter in the areas where there's more highlights. So in here, I'm seeing a little bit darker shadow, then it gets lighter again. I'm not worrying too much about the grid lines right now because I'm guessing when I blend this, it's going to blend into the grid lines, but I'll erase those later as needed. And again, a lot of learning how to draw is really just learning how to see, learning how to notice where there's light, notice where there's dark, and then incorporating that into your drawing and not letting your brain take over and tell you what you think something is supposed to look like, right? We are drawing what we see, we are trusting our eyes, we are trusting the grid. We don't let our brains take over and tell us that something doesn't look like what we imagine it's supposed to look like. We're just going to trust our eyes and what we see happening in front of us. So I know, like right now, this is just looking like kind of a scribbly mess of values, but I also know it's not going to stay looking like that when I'm done. I'm noticing a little triangle of value over here. It's like a nice dark shadow. This edge over here. The hoodie is a little bit darker. Okay, so I'm just gonna focus on shading in the hood right now. And again, if you wanna see my reference, it's right here next to me as I am working. Maybe I'll try to hold it. Maybe I'll try to fold this and have it next to me while I work, so you guys can kind of see both. So I'm going to start with this side over here, and I'm going to use my tortillon. Again, small circles, and I'm noticing this triangle of black there. So I'm going to kind of start by blending that. Again, those small circles with your tortillon and holding your tortillon kind of flat against the paper. We're not holding it up like a pencil, we're holding it almost parallel to the paper. And I'm noticing some darker shadows in here. Come into this little triangle of darker shadows. One thing that helps me sometimes is if I'm having a hard time like really noticing, like, where are the darkest shadows? Squint your eyes. When you do that, like, look at your drawing or look at your photo and then squint. And when you do that, you kind of up the contrast automatically. So your darks get darker, the lights get lighter. And it's kind of a quick and easy way to see, okay, where are the shadows? Where is the lightest area? If one area starts to get too dark, I'm not gonna worry too much about it. I'm gonna keep going because I know that I can always come back, and I always have my trusty eraser with me, which I'm definitely gonna be using in just a moment to erase out some of these highlights. One of the things with fabric is paying attention, that's important, is paying attention to where do you see a strong shadow that kind of is dark and then it fades out, and where do you see shadows that are a little bit more crisp? Like you can see right here, there's a really crisp highlight right there that I'm gonna make sure I maintain as I do this. And if I lose that shadow, or that, rather, if I lose that highlight, it's okay, because I can always come back in again with that eraser as needed. Again, I'm noticing this side of the hoodie over here, the hood has a big highlight. So I'm gonna leave that pretty light here. I'm gonna, this is a strong outline right now that I do not wanna have at the end. Do you notice how the edge of the hoodie here is really white? There's kind of a white highlight over here. Right now I have that line in there just to kind of delineate the edge. But as I'm shading my background later on, I will get rid of that outline. We know that outlines are one of the fastest ways to make things look less realistic, because there are not outlines on things in real life when we look at them. It makes things look cartoonish when they have a strong outline when they're not supposed to. All right, so again, I've just kind of blocked in like basic dark shadow here. There's a shadow here, shadow here. This really comes in a little bit darker over in this direction. This comes up around this way, and like that. All right, now I'm gonna come in with my small eraser. You can buy very, very tiny erasers for more detailed work. I really like using those. But because this is pretty small, and I don't have one of those erasers right now, I'm just gonna use my tiny pencil eraser. I also like using these. The edge of these works really nicely. Like I could even use this for some of the highlight work right in here. If I take the edge of that eraser, and I'm not pressing very hard, and notice how I'm lifting my eraser up as I go. I'm not making a strong, sharp edge. I'm lifting my eraser to kind of feather the edges up. The corner of your eraser is nice also for some of that detail work. You can see there's another little highlight over here. On this side as well. Again, the thing about fabric is it's not supposed to necessarily look like something. It's not, you know, it's kind of a nebulous shape. It doesn't have a strong defined edge to it. And so a lot of with fabric is just fading one value into another, really gently darkening up areas. Remember, the darker you make something, the more it goes back in space away from you. When you lighten something up, it comes back toward you in space. I'm noticing this has to be a little bit more of an angle here. And again, I know that my proportions aren't right exactly perfect. As I look at this, I can see like there are some areas where the angle isn't exactly right, or my, you know, the highlight isn't the exact same shape. That's okay. I'm not gonna let myself get too overly concerned about making things look, you know, perfect. That's not what this is about. This is just for fun today. And hopefully, I mean, you want it to be fun. Hopefully drawing is fun. Again, wherever you did your eraser, I always recommend going back over and just softening those edges up a little bit. And I always clean up my edges, especially with something like this where it's fabric. Right? If it were hair, we would draw in some like little flyaway hairs, give it a little bit more texture, but because this is fabric, there is a really strong edge here that we want to keep clean. And again, I'm going to get rid of that outline over here. I might use my Tortillion to just darken this up just a little bit more. Probably could darken all of this up a little. I probably have even a little bit too much contrast in here, like these dark shadows and highlights aren't quite as pronounced in high contrast as I've made them in the photo, but that's okay. We want it to look like there's some, you know, movement in this hood. And I can always come back and I can darken up the highlights a little bit more if I want to. So I'm gonna move into this part of the back now. And again, same thing as before, I'm gonna use the side of my 4B pencil, hold it on its side, and really the first thing I like to do is I like to just put in some graphite, but I'm noticing this shadow right there and that little edge of a highlight. You see that? That highlight is really important because it delineates between the neck and the shoulders. So I'm gonna make sure I keep that highlight in there. I'm not gonna shade in that area. And it goes into here as well. I'm gonna darken this up. I'm also noticing this highlight right here. So I'm gonna leave that area light as well and shade in between. I'm gonna come out into the shoulders. Now a lot of this area in the middle of the back is just one shade of gray. It's really here at the edges where the sweatshirt's kind of pulled across the back that we start getting more of those shadows. So I'm seeing like there's a shadow kind of in there. There's another one right in here. There's a highlight right there I'm gonna pay attention to. Strong shadow right here. All right, so I'll have to go back in with my eraser in this area for sure, but let's get our Tortillion going. Start blending those, again, small circles. This is where sometimes students work way too fast because they get impatient and they start doing really big, streaky lines back and forth. Don't let yourself become impatient and lose the quality of your work. We want to work nice and even keel so that this really looks smooth. Especially if you're investing some time into this drawing, it's worth it to go nice and slow and really get that even layer of graphite. All right, so now I'm getting into these shadows over here. I kind of went into my highlight more than I wanted, but that's okay. I can go back and clean that up. All right, I'm gonna go in with my eraser here and really pay attention to, there's one highlight in particular that I really want to emphasize, and that's this one right here. I feel like it's one that I kind of lost a little bit. So this kind of comes up. You can notice how pulling that eraser line out, when you erase out a highlight, you make something come toward you in space. So if I go across here, I erase that a little bit. This highlight up here is a little bit too bright, I think. It's a little too defined right now. I'm also going to notice that there's a little bit more shadow in this area, around the shoulder and in here. Again, all this is just shadows and highlights. If you find yourself thinking your work is looking a little bit flat, that just means you need more values in there, right? So we need to darken our darks, lighten our lights, get more contrast. And that often means going over the same area multiple times. So sometimes we make something too dark and then we lighten it and then we realize we made it too light, and then we have to go back and darken it a little bit. And it's just that push, pull back and forth of making it eventually the right, hopefully the right value that we're striving for. Again, as I'm doing this, you can't see my eyes, but my eyes are constantly jumping back and forth between here and here and here and here. I had a professor in college tell me one time that you should be looking at your photo, meaning looking over here, at least half the time, at least as much as you're looking at your drawing. If you're looking more at your drawing than you are at your photo, again, then you are making it up, right? Because your drawing isn't giving you any information about what to do next. It's the photo that we're trying to replicate. So again, I'm going to do this side now. I'm noticing a really strong shadow coming around this way. And I'm noticing right above that is a highlight. So I'm going to leave that area kind of light right there. I'm also noticing there's another shadow right underneath. And then notice the shift in value between right here where there's kind of the seam on the hoodie, and then this part is a little darker. So I'm noticing this area down here is a little bit darker. So I'm gonna darken that a little bit more with my 4B. Again, notice how I'm holding my pencil right now, right? I'm not holding it like I'm writing my name. I'm holding it way out here on the edge, almost like flat, parallel to the paper. All right, let's get our tortillon going. And small circles. There's definitely a bit more highlight happening on the left side of the body here. I don't want to lose this contrast. Notice right here, there's this beautiful triangle shape right there. I'm going to make sure I don't lose the sharpness of that edge. All right, and then small circles. Again, I want to blend this just as nicely as I did on the other side. And again, the edge of the arm here, I'm going to go in and I'm going to clean that edge up because right now it's looking pretty fuzzy. So I'm going to use the tip of my pencil to just clean that a little. Notice how, again, I'm not doing an outline. I'm not doing a heavy black line there. It's just a shift in value. If you find yourself getting smudges out here on the extra outside edges, I always kind of wait to clean those up until the end. Here, I'm just gonna fold this over so you guys can see this better. I always do that at the very end. I feel like it doesn't make sense to erase your smudges if you're gonna end up going over that area again anyway and probably smudging it again. This side doesn't have quite as much dramatic shadow as the other, but I definitely see that little arch there. I'm seeing there's a little bit of a highlight underneath it, a little bit of a shadow underneath it. Remember, I told you all, learning how to draw is really just a new way of learning how to see, which I personally think is really exciting. I remember when I started learning more tips and tricks for drawing, I noticed the way that I just saw the world was different. And it was really cool. And once you start seeing the world like an artist, you can never go back. You can only ever see things in terms of shadows and highlights, which I think is pretty cool. So again, I'm gonna go back with my eraser. I'm gonna lighten this up a little bit. I see this little area up here I'm gonna lighten up. I'm gonna look at it comparatively here, so make sure that I'm getting this. I'm noticing this highlight that kind of comes all the way across. So I'm gonna be just using the edge of my eraser to lighten that up. All right, so I'm gonna keep working on this. I'll keep finishing up down here, but I hope that that beginning part at least was helpful for you to see. Again, I have a lot more contrast happening in here than is in the actual photo. So anything that's like a highlight here, you can see I made it quite a bit brighter to really draw out that contrast. At the very end, if I want, I can always go back and soften those highlights a little bit more, but it's better to have more contrast starting out than not enough. Thanks for watching, and I hope this was helpful.